6 justices, 1 ruling. And the entire architecture of American trade policy just changed. This morning, the Supreme Court struck down Donald Trump's sweeping global tariffs in a 6-3 decision, calling them an unauthorized use of presidential power. 2 hours later, the president announced he was doing it again with a different law. Welcome to constitutional whack-a-mole.
This is Zeitgeist. It's Friday, February 20th, 2026. Tonight, the biggest Supreme Court defeat of Trump's presidency. An ultimatum that could start a war with Iran, a British prince in handcuffs, and an American teenager shot dead in the West Bank.
Let's start with the ruling. Chief Justice John Roberts delivered the opinion this morning in what legal scholars are already calling one of the most consequential trade decisions in American history. The question before the court was simple. Does the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, known as IEEPA, give the president the power to impose tariffs? Roberts, writing for the majority, was blunt. Quote, "Our task today is to decide only whether the power to regulate importation, as granted to the president in IEEPA, embraces the power to impose tariffs. It does not."
For people who haven't been following this, IEEPA is the law Trump used to justify basically all of his major tariffs. The reciprocal tariffs on every country, the tariffs on Canada and Mexico over fentanyl, the whole thing.
Exactly. IEEPA was a 1977 law designed to let a president regulate financial transactions during a national emergency. Trump declared a national emergency over the trade deficit, which hit $1.2 trillion last year, and used that as the basis for tariffs touching nearly every country on Earth. No president in the history of the statute had ever used it to impose tariffs. Roberts called that fact, quote, telling, and said Trump's interpretation would represent a, quote, transformative expansion of the president's authority over tariff policy that would replace long-standing executive-legislative collaboration with, quote, unchecked presidential policymaking.
This was 6-3, and the lineup is important.
Hugely important. Roberts was joined by the 3 liberal justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, plus 2 conservatives that Trump himself appointed during his first term, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett. The 3 dissenters were Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh. Trump immediately praised the dissenters and turned on his own appointees, saying he was, quote, ashamed of certain members of the court for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. He called the ruling terrible and totally defective.
What does this mean practically? Are tariffs just gone?
Not entirely, and that's the critical part. About a third of Trump-era tariff revenue came from duties imposed under other laws, like Section 301 tariffs on China or Section 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum. Those weren't touched by this ruling. But the majority of tariff revenue, the IEEPA tariffs, are now struck down. The Penn-Wharton budget model estimates the government could owe up to $175 billion in refunds to importers. Markets rallied on the news. The S&P 500 gained about 0.7%. The Dow rose 230 points. The Nasdaq snapped a 5-week losing streak. Retailers, footwear companies, e-commerce stocks all surged.
But Trump didn't just accept this.
Not for a second. Within 2 hours of the ruling, Trump announced a 10% global tariff on all imports, this time using a different legal authority, an executive order under what he called normal tariff law. He said the tariffs he's imposing now are, quote, over and above our normal tariffs already being charged. Even Kavanaugh, in his dissent, acknowledged this was coming. He wrote that the ruling does not necessarily foreclose Trump from imposing, quote, most, if not all, of these same sorts of tariffs under other statutory authorities. So this isn't the end of the trade war. It's the end of one legal theory and the beginning of a new legal battle.
If the Supreme Court was the domestic earthquake today, the foreign policy story is even more alarming, because the president is now openly talking about striking Iran.
Yesterday, at the Board of Peace meeting in Washington, Trump told reporters Iran has 10 to 15 days, quote, pretty much maximum, to reach a deal on its nuclear program or, quote, really bad things would happen. Then today, at a White House breakfast, a reporter asked him directly if he was considering a limited military strike. His answer, I guess I can say I am considering that. That is the first time a sitting president has explicitly acknowledged weighing strikes against Iran since the 2025 war ended 8 months ago.
This is only 8 months after the United States and Israel already hit Iranian nuclear sites in Operation Midnight Hammer. 12 days of strikes. And now we're potentially going back?
That's the context that makes this so dangerous. According to the Wall Street Journal, the options under consideration include an initial limited strike on military and government sites, with the possibility of ramping up from there. The USS Ford aircraft carrier and its strike group are currently transiting toward the eastern Mediterranean. Bloomberg notes that Trump's 10 to 15-day timeline could coincide with an upcoming IAEA board meeting, where the question of further censuring Iran is already on the agenda. Iran responded through its foreign ministry, saying the US is, quote, risking a crisis and warning it would retaliate against American bases in the region if attacked. Russia also warned against escalation.
Has Congress weighed in?
Representatives Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie, a Democrat and a Republican, are reportedly preparing a bipartisan war powers resolution for next week, arguing that any strikes on Iran require congressional authorization. But whether that gets to a vote in time, given the timeline Trump just set, is an open question. The clock is ticking.
From a president under pressure at home and abroad, we go to a different kind of reckoning. One 400 years in the making.
On his 66th birthday, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince Andrew, was arrested by Thames Valley Police on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He was held for 11 hours at Aylsham Police Station in Norfolk, then released, quote, under investigation. That means he hasn't been charged, but he also hasn't been cleared. It was the first arrest of a senior member of the British royal family in nearly 4 centuries.
What specifically is the allegation?
The investigation centres on whether Andrew, while serving as the UK's trade envoy in 2010, shared confidential government documents with Jeffrey Epstein. One email from the latest batch of Epstein files, the 3 million pages released by the DOJ last month, appears to show Andrew forwarding Epstein a report from his special advisor about a diplomatic visit to Southeast Asia. Misconduct in public office carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment in the UK. Thames Valley Police said they searched 2 addresses in Berkshire and Norfolk, including the Royal Lodge, where Andrew lived until earlier this month.
How did the royal family respond?
King Charles released a personal statement. Unusually, he signed it Charles R. rather than issuing it through Buckingham Palace, saying he learned the news with, quote, the deepest concern and that the law must take its course. He pledged the family's full and wholehearted support and cooperation with investigators. This is yet another blow to a royal family already reeling. Andrew was stripped of his titles last year. He settled a sexual abuse lawsuit with one of Epstein's victims. And now, police are questioning his royal protection officers about what they saw and heard during his time with Epstein.
And finally, violence in the West Bank that hits close to home.
19-year-old Nasrallah Abu Siam, a Palestinian-American citizen, was shot and killed by an Israeli settler on Wednesday in the village of Mukmas, east of Ramallah. According to witnesses, a group of settlers entered the village and attacked a farmer, sparking clashes with residents. The Israeli military arrived and used tear gas, sound grenades, and live ammunition. During the chaos, armed settlers shot Abu Siam and injured several others. A witness told the Associated Press the settlers, quote, clubbed those injured with sticks after they had fallen to the ground. He was laid to rest yesterday. Abu Siam was the second Palestinian-American killed by Israeli settlers in less than a year. The US Embassy condemned the violence, but did not call for an investigation or announce any consequences.
And there was also a major study this week on the broader toll in Gaza.
The Lancet Global Health published the first independent population survey of mortality in the Gaza Strip. Their finding, more than 75,000 Palestinians were killed in the first 15 months of the war, a figure far higher than the 49,000 deaths reported by local health officials at the time. The study involved surveying 2,000 Palestinian households over 7 days starting December 30th, 2024. Separately, a UN Human Rights Office report raised concerns that Israel's actions in both Gaza and the West Bank may constitute ethnic cleansing, citing the, quote, methodical destruction of entire neighborhoods and the denial of humanitarian assistance.
A Supreme Court that checked the president's power, and a president who responded by finding a new way to wield it. A 10-day clock on whether America starts another war in the Middle East. A former prince behind bars, however briefly, and a 19-year-old American citizen buried in a land where the violence keeps getting worse while the world keeps looking away. That's your Friday. We'll see you next week.